Good morning. Please feel free to move around a little bit if that's helpful to see or hear better. And thank you for re-engaging the COVID precautions. It's so nice not to wear masks, but it's what we need to do now. So thank you for that. And what are these things called that hold your bones and muscles together? Tendons? Yeah, they break, as it turns out. I was at a friend's house last night. They were throwing a little birthday party for me, and my birthday was a couple weeks ago. And I was sneaking around one side of the house with one of my little friends. She's 6, and we got to a place, and I put her on my back, and then I was stepped on a stone while I was holding with my left hand to balance myself, and the stone shifted, and then went beep, beep, beep. And then the muscles hanging out where it's not supposed to and stuff. Anyway, I'll go into the doctor this afternoon, and I'm sure it will be an adventure. I was feeling a little like we have one ancestor who had only one arm. Psychosomatic was his name. He cut off his left arm, and a kind of proof of his dedication to the way. And so this morning I was kind of feeling, maybe this is what it's like to be Psychosomatic with the sitting. So hopefully that won't be my fate. So the past several weeks I've been talking on this theme of psychosomatic, Zazen. And where I was starting with that is encouraging everyone in their practice to start an inquiry into the indivisibility of mind and body. Psychosomatic, psycho meaning mind, and somatic meaning embodiment or the body. That when we practice meditation, other Buddhist practices or any practices, any life, all of life, is really psychosomatic. It's not that there is mind and there's body, but there is a mind and body non-duality which is unfolding continuously. And what we call life really is psychosomatic. So when we think of meditation, not to think of meditation simply as a mental activity or simply as a physical activity or even an activity that has a physical and a mental aspect, but to start inquiring into the way in which the physical and the mental are not really separate, that what we're experiencing does not land just on one side or the other, but that these are deeply interrelated or interpenetrating. So sometimes talk about mind and the body, and sometimes I've been playing with that a little bit. I've been talking about experience and phenomena. So experience being, what do I experience moment to moment? And that feels very subjective, right? And then there's objects or their phenomena out there, like the things that I experience as very tangible, but also could include thoughts, could include things which are inside me, but they're still, I'm thinking of them as objects of awareness. Right? So mind, body, experience, phenomena. And last week I was trying to say that we can develop a sensitivity to the way that our mind participates in phenomena. This is one of the core fruits of meditation, that as we sit, we take some time to sit quietly, we can feel the way in which phenomena don't just arise independently. There's no Ejo out here, outside of you, but for you to experience me, your mind is involved. Right? On a very practical level, just to be able to see or to hear, to remember, all of those things are involved in experiencing a phenomena, the phenomena of Ejo right now. So we can see into that more in a more and more subtle way as we practice meditation, and to develop that sensitivity is one of the points of a continual meditation practice. To see the way that we are participating continuously. And I went on to say that one of the things that sensitivity allows us to do is to feel into the way that we clamp down as we objectify the world, as we have this habit of constantly turning all of our experiences into objects, right? Into things. And as we do that, there's a kind of a stiffening of a part of our being. That the part of our being that is involved in making images, that is making experiences continuously, as we insist on the world being this kind of world of objects, that part of us just does the same thing again and again. It gets very narrow and tight. And it's one of the main engines of how our karma keeps replicating itself. The same patterns we call these habit energies, the patterns that play over and over and over and over again in our life. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, all of them are unstable. Right? Unstable in the sense that they won't bring some kind of lasting rest. They just keep playing out, playing out, playing out, playing out. One of the primary ways that it functions is we make the world the way our karma is. We see a world that's based on our karma. So this clamp down process, this tightness, it's replicating the karma again and again and again and again and again. You can experience this in really simple ways, like, the really obvious one I bring up all the time is when you're in a hurry, did you notice how many people are slow drivers? It's like magic. When you really need to get somewhere, it's like everybody just, they just they just decided, let's go 10 miles under the speed limit, So that kind of thing's happening all the time. We can see it in that kind of situation really clearly. And it's kind of funny if you can get over your angst about it or your frustration with it. But that basic principle is happening all the time. I'm not saying that we just make up the world. I might say that, but that would be a different talk. But what I'm saying is we don't need to think about that. We don't need to say I'm making up the world, but we can just notice, again, how I'm participating, how the world is appearing through the way that I'm seeing it. And that we get really tired out by that clamping down. And so we sit down, quiet for a couple of minutes, and what does our mind do? It starts just spinning with all kinds of thoughts and ideas and different things. Because we're trying to hold it in this fixed position all the time. We're turning it out into objects constantly, making the world, making the world, making the world, making the world. And we say, let me step back here and just not do that for a little bit. And so, of course, your mind is like, woo, some freedom from that constant making. And in that place, a kind of fantasy world opens up. Now, in the traditional Buddhism, we talk about the twin pits, the kind of holes that you fall in while you're meditating. One is called distraction, and the other is called dullness. Usually, this fantasy type part of our mind, kind of just floating off places, that's what people think of as being distraction. That's the classical description. You hear that all the time. They say, stop thinking about all this random stuff and come back to your breath, for example. Come back to what's actually here. What I'm proposing is that what's actually here is also a distraction. What you call actually here is the objectifying of the world, objectifying of your body, objectifying of your mind, turning it into a thing. That is also a distraction. It's not only when our mind floats off into something, but our incessant pattern of creating the object, creating the object, creating the object. That also is a kind of distraction. And that those things tire us out, and this pit of dullness is also there. So if you take up meditation practice, you're doing it regularly, you'll notice this. I'm not saying people who are not good at meditating fall into these two pits. I'm saying anybody who meditates falls into these two pits. That's what meditation is learning about yourself through falling into these pits, right? And you don't want to just stay there. You don't want to say, it's inevitable, dullness is inevitable, so I'll just hang out in this pit of dullness, right? You say, how could it be different? What's the quality of my mind? What's the quality of how I am here now? How I'm breathing, how I'm sitting, how I'm regarding the world, in which this dullness is caught up. Sometimes we talk about it like a razor's edge, and you fall off distraction, dullness. But there's this line to walk, this path, which you can't really locate it. It's so sharp, so you have to fall off both sides, to find where's that balance point. So this may seem, very philosophical in some sense. It is, but I'm suggesting something that I feel is really important, and that is that our usual way of being mindful or being attentive may actually be exacerbating our ignorance rather than providing medicine for our ignorance. I'm going to say that again. The way that we think about or the way we regard practicing mindfulness or attentiveness may actually be exacerbating ignorance. It may be exacerbating our dualistic sense of the world, that I'm a subject and the world is a bunch of objects. Because if being mindful or paying attention is simply that objectifying, putting all of our mental energy out into things, then we're simply reifying or making stronger that pattern of objectification. Even though we may feel calm, right? We're like, I really just settled on my breath. I settled on my body because my body is what's actually here. And you may find some measure of calm there, but you might also just lift off of the rest of the world. Your position becomes isolated. And there can be a lot of calmness in isolation for a while. But there's also big problems with isolation. So to free that part of ourself that is image making, you could even call it the imagination, to experience phenomena, to experience the world in creative ways, in liberating ways. This is part of what meditation provides for us, if we regard it in that way. Not just let me cut off all the baloney, right? Get rid of all the spurious thoughts and just see what's really here. But say, no, there is a part of me which is constantly imaging the world. It's constantly making images, stories. And through that, a world is appearing. So meditation can bring us closer to a realization of that part of ourself that is constantly making these images, and free it from this compulsive need to just nail things down. This is the way it is. This is the way it is. This is the way it is. This is one of the reasons that we become so anxious, because of course the world will not allow that. The world won't allow itself to be nailed down. Right? It's always changing. And so we've nailed something down, but it doesn't stay that way. And so we're very anxious because we're constantly trying to nail it down, but it won't stay there. We're pounding out the same pattern again and again and again. So this inquiry that I'm suggesting is not just about making your mind calm, but it's an inquiry of the non-separation. What am I experiencing? How is it moving through my experience? And how is the phenomena itself? To feel for that very directly. This is a key to freeing the image maker, to freeing that part of ourself that is making the world again and again and again and again, organizing things so that we can experience them. As we start to free that image maker, innumerable meanings, innumerable significances, is that a word? Significances? Yeah. Significant things, they flow out. The world becomes meaningful, not just clear in the sense that my mind is uncluttered, right? But things have purpose. By meaning here, I don't mean something abstract. I mean just the actuality of all of these beings that we occupy the world with, human and otherwise, that they are significant to us. just in what they are, who they are. This is very different than a retreat into fantasy of the kind of embattled image maker. That's this other. I'm not saying just fantasize, because normally what we're doing when we're fantasizing is we're just I'm sick of having to make the world all the time, so I'm going to sit here and make another world, let it be free, not in this way that I'm compelled to. By the way, these demon boxes we all carry around, what I'm talking about? These, why they have such a high level of toxicity in my estimation is because they're also linked into this. We want an image, right? What gives us an image quicker than anything? The TikTok and a swipe, right? Or whatever it is you like to do on your phone. It gives you image like right away. Boom, 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 boom. So that image maker is like on overdrive, doesn't know how to stop, right? Just boom, 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 boom. Well, our minds are that way too. It's not just the phones that do that. That's how our minds are. So, in addition to this investigation, this inquiry into the non-separation of the mind and material, experience and phenomena, you can also bring in the regard of image, like the study through images. Now, I mean this in a very uncomplicated way. You think about an image on an altar, like the one that's behind me here. There's an image of Shakyamuni Buddha, right in the center of our altar. When you see this image, one way is to say, oh yeah, there's an image out there, it's made out of wood, someone carved it, it's nice. Ejo told me a story about how he brought it back from Japan, something like that. Maybe you've practiced here a long time and you're used to seeing this image, or maybe you've practiced here for a long time and you don't even see it anymore because it's there all the time, and it's just become kind of a given. But if you interact with an image like this, if you have an altar at home, or you have a picture of the Buddha, it could be a picture of anything, but I'm just going to talk about Buddha right now, and you interact with it, you make offerings, you burn incense, you return to it again and again and again. That's not just a process of reifying an image, making the Buddha. The Buddha is also entering you. This very physical thing, this phenomena, is not separate from your mind. So this freeing of the image maker is an invitation to see things in another way, or to allow images to be significant, to allow them to make impressions on you, not to regard them in such a kind of willy-nilly way as just objects. You see, that's what the kind of driving of the image maker, that's the kind of thought that's wrapped up in that. Oh, it's just a thing. It's just a statue. People say that all the time in the West. Western Buddhism, we love that. Oh, it's just a statue. It's like, why is there a just in front of statue? Just a statue? No. This image of awakening, the personification of the possibility for a life that is not trapped in incessant suffering making. That's not just an image. So, as we meditate, and we find that there is this intermediate space where mind and objects are not so separate, then to encounter images that live in that space is something very important. Religion, mythology, spirituality give us those things. They're technologies, we could say, about that. Are they technologies that ever get misused? Definitely. But they're very important. We can't leave them out. know if any of you have ever been to the restaurant called the Cornucopia. It's on 17th, 17th down to Washington-ish, in that area somewhere. And my family, when my kids were little, we would go there a lot. That was a place that everyone could get something they liked. And we would sit out in the, they have kind of outdoor seating, and we would sit back there, and that was always really nice. And in the door that goes from the inside the restaurant to the back, there's a tree, and the door opens up, and right underneath the tree, there's a big Buddha there. It's maybe this tall. And I love to watch people coming through that door, especially children. I mean, part of it is because children are smaller, so this big Buddha is a lot bigger if you're littler, and kind of more on your eye level. But also, the way a child comes into a space and looks around is really different than adults, especially in that kind of situation. You know, parents are coming out and they've got a kid, and they're like, which table are we going to get? You know, you're all in like, okay, what's the best place? Oh, is the table they're taking to us a good table? Not such a good table. I wonder if we could sit over there. Oh, let me look at the beer list. Let me, you know, doing all this, and the kid's just like, and so they would come kind of tumbling out that door, boom. And I mean, almost without exception, when a child would come through that door, they would stop. And they would look at that Buddha, and the look on their face was just like, it wasn't surprise, like, oh, it was more like beholding something sacred. And then, you know, and they'd go over and do whatever they did. This is the kind of simplicity that I'm talking about. When we free that part of ourselves through seeing that the mind is always involved in creating whatever experience I have, and just loosening up the way that I drive it. Now, when I encounter an image, something else is possible. Some significance of the image can be received. You know, our images sometimes come in statues, they come in stories. So the most famous story in Buddhism is the awakening of Buddha under the Bodhi tree. And maybe you've seen some drawings of that, different ways that artists have produced an image that we can see the image, but just to know the bare bones of the story, that the Buddha arrives at the Bodhi tree after a long search, a long, long search, trying everything that he could to really find the center of things where suffering can be released. And he finally finds that center place as the tree of awakening. And he sits down under the tree and is assailed by the forces of ignorance. There's a really great documentary that was made. I believe it's just called The Buddha. I know it's on Netflix right now for sure. I saw it. I watched it the other day. There's a lot of animation in that. I have a really good animation of this Buddha's awakening. I highly recommend that documentary, but particularly the images that are in it. You know, what do you see in your own mind's eye when you know that story of a great tree at the center of things? You call it the fulcrum, the apex. Not apex is the top. This one's like the center point, like a balance. If the whole world was a disc and there's one spot in the middle in which everything pivots. What would it be to sit under that tree? That's what we do when we're sitting Zazen. We're sitting under that tree. Another image, this is in East Asia, particularly Japan. This may be one of the most famous images of an assembly of the Buddha. This comes from the introduction to the Lotus Sutra. And I'm going to just read part of it. And I'm going to read it in a slightly abbreviated, actually quite abbreviated form. It goes on for several pages, but I've picked out some of the sentences just to give you a flavor for it. So the idea here isn't to build the image in your head, but just listen, see how it strikes you. At one time, the Buddha was staying at Rajagriha on Holy Eagle Peak with a large group of great monks, 12,000 in all. All of them were arhats, without faults, free from afflictions, self-developed, emancipated from all bounds of existence, and mentally free. The nun, Mahapajapati, was there with 6,000 followers, and the nun Yashodhara, the mother of Rahula, with her followers. There were 80,000 bodhisattvas, great ones, all free from backsliding in the pursuit of supreme awakening. Their fame had spread to innumerable worlds, and they were able to liberate innumerable hundreds of thousands of living beings. Also there, at that time, were Indra, king of the gods, with his following of 20,000 children of heaven. There also were the 8 dragon kings, each with several 100,000 followers. There were 4 chimera kings, each with several 100,000 followers. In addition, there were 4 centaur kings, each with several thousand followers. There were 4 Ashura kings, each with several 100,000 followers. 4 griffin kings were also there, each with several 100,000 followers. And King Ajatashatha, son of Vaidehi, with several 100,000 followers, was there. Each prostrated themselves at the Buddha's feet, then withdrew and sat to one side. At that time, the world-honored one, surrounded by the 4 groups, was given offerings, revered, honored, and praised. For the sake of all the bodhisattvas, he taught the great vehicle sutra, called Innumerable Meanings, the dharma by which bodhisattvas are taught and which Buddhas watch over and keep always in mind. Having taught this sutra, sitting cross-legged, the Buddha entered the state of concentration called the place of innumerable meanings, in which his body and mind were completely motionless. Then Mandarava, great Mandarava, Manjushaka, and great Manjushaka flowers rained down from the sky on the Buddha and the entire assembly, while the whole Buddha world trembled and shook in 6 ways. Then the whole congregation, monks and nuns, laymen and laywomen, gods, dragons, satyrs, centaurs, asuras, griffins, chimeras, pythons, humans and non-humans, as well as minor kings and the wheel-turning saintly kings, astonished because this had never happened before, with palms together and with complete attention, joyously looked up at the Buddha. From the tuft of white hair between his eyebrows, one of his characteristic features, the Buddha emitted a beam of light, illuminating 18,000 worlds in the east, so that there was nowhere that it did not reach, down to the lowest purgatory and up to the highest heaven. In those worlds, all the living beings in the 6 states could be seen. Likewise, the Buddhas existing at present in those lands could be seen, and the sutra teachings those Buddhas were preaching could be heard. Monks and nuns, laymen and laywomen who had attained the way through practice could also be seen. Further, one could see bodhisattvas, the great ones, walking the bodhisattva way due to various causes and conditions, with various degrees of faith and understanding, and in various forms. Likewise, Buddhas who had entered complete nirvana could be seen, and one could see their stupas made of the 7 precious materials, stupas that had been built to hold the remains of those Buddhas after they had entered complete nirvana. So this is a gateway image of the Lotus Sutra. This place, Eagle Peak, sometimes called Vulture Peak, is a place you could go to in India. I haven't been there, but it's just a shelf on the side of a mountain. I've heard that really only a couple dozen people could sit there. And yet in the Lotus Sutra, not only are there countless humans there, but all kinds of beings have assembled. And then the Buddha emits this beam of light in which all worlds throughout space and time can be seen in the awakening of the Buddhas in those worlds, and all of the people who are walking the path can be seen. Now, I'm offering this to you today as an example of a kind of teaching that has everything to do with meditation, but we have a kind of habit of setting it aside. When we come to meditation and regard this part of our being, that this very creative part of ourselves, that is always working through stories, working through images, crafting the world moment after moment after moment, these kinds of teachings can speak into that place in a way that a philosophical argument or a technique or anything can't. It actually works with the part of our being that is making images. Now, this entryway to the Lotus Sutra, I chose this one because the Lotus Sutra is one of the most flowery. It's the Lotus Sutra, right? I mean, this is a very high level of grandeur. Right? Other sutras have other things. I'm not suggesting that the Lotus Sutra should be what resonates for you, but something should resonate for you. Right? And that's part of the discipline of a practice, is to listen for what is true in those myths. Not true because they're objectively true, but true because in that place where I'm easing up on my image maker that's having to make this concrete world all the time, right? That the story gets in. The image gets in. And I begin to regard the world in a different way. Not as a place of objects to my subject, but a great assembly of all kinds of beings. So as the Lotus Sutra uses the term innumerable meanings or innumerable significances, it's talking about that place. The Buddha entered this totally still concentration of innumerable meanings. That's what the sutra says. That mediating space. So my question to you would be, what does this image mean to you? What is the image of a Buddha, of an assembly, of awakening? And not a mean in an abstract way, but mean in a that it's important to you. Maybe I should say it that way. In what way is it important to you? That's something I'd like you to consider. Any questions or comments? If you're online, you can just jump in. If you're out there, come to the Engawa, and then Togen will point this mic at you, I think. Yeah, there you go. Hi.
When you were talking about the Buddha being just a statue, a statue. Right? So, we're used to talking about the sacred objects of a tradition as symbols, right? So it's a symbol of awakening. Now, don't worry too much about that man sitting up on the altar is just a symbol of awakening.
Right.
And I kind of know what meaning is when it comes to symbols. And I hear the distinction you make between significance and meaning. But I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit more about what these resonances are of the world.
Yeah. So the symbol's a symbol because the thing that it's symbolizing can't be seen. So this is like there's a kind of symbol where we have a symbol that just stands in for something else because it's not there. To have a massive red fire truck here in the backyard would be impossible. Well, not impossible. It would take a little while. So if I just say massive red fire truck, that can symbolize the red fire truck. But there could be a red fire truck here. But the kind of symbolism that we're talking about here, like with the Buddha, is a symbol for something which we would never be able to encounter in that kind of discrete way. We can't see it in that way. And so a symbol is how it appears to us. There's a kind of personification of an ungraspability, which shows up as a thing. I mean, it's a miracle, really, that the ungraspable can show up personified. And that's why feeling those resonances is so important, because if we don't, then the symbol, it gets very flat. It's just, oh, I know I'm supposed to pay attention to this because my religion says I'm supposed to. And then where is the meaning in it? Why is it significant other than someone told me that it is significant? So in this practice of meditation or in chanting or any kind of the religious type activity that we do, that those resonances are movements of something we'll never be able to grab a hold of. We don't want to grab a hold of them. That's actually the problem. We want to be in a complete relationship with them, which is the opposite of grabbing hold of. To be in good relationship, just like with another person, in good relationship is not us to make them be something and how they are. We're constantly meeting something we can't control. So those resonances are a way that we stay in that relationship with those forces, those beings, those truths, and the symbol now has a different kind of power for us because it's pointing us back to something that's ungraspable. That's my story anyway. What do you think?
Well, I get confused because I feel like there's all of this toxic stuff that Western religion has done by turning the objects that we venerate into mere symbols that then keep us at, like, just like,
Right, yeah.
That's sort of like breaking all the idols.
Yeah.
Don't, and then you have no contact with the sacred. And then there's this other side where it's like, you better be careful with that flag because it's a symbol. There's also this other toxic thing that happens.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to.
Well, that's why I think when I present this kind of teaching, I always want to present it with a lot of gentleness. Because a symbol, by definition, if it's a true symbol, has great power. And so great power can always be misused. And so we should take care of it really carefully. And when our traditions are functioning well, they don't always function well, but when they're functioning well, that's kind of the core purposes for a tradition, is to care for those symbols. In Buddhism, we would call them expedient means. That the statue of a Buddha on the altar is an expedient means. It is a way in which the Buddha Dharma shows up to us. And that's all there is expedient means. So I think that's a place where I really treasure the way in which Buddhism approaches this by saying expedient means and all things are expedient means, rather than saying expedient means, this is the true expedient means, and the rest of them are not the true expedient means. The Lotus Sutra is quite strict about that in a frustrating way. Like, you can't figure out what anything is, because it's all expedient means, which is the point to begin with. Yeah. Hi.
Could you tie this that we're just talking about now with the simplicity of the child walking in and seeing the Buddha in that moment of encounter, and the simplicity of that sutra that's said in the morning, water wets, you know, the suchness of elements and things and encounters and kind of the essential quality of that.
Yeah. So they're exactly the same thing. When we try to describe it, of course, it's very complex. Like if you try to describe a flower, you know, you could never end. You just have to keep talking forever because the flower can't be captured by your words. But there's also this actual flower. And what I mean by actual is not this object that's outside of your mind, but the truth of the phenomena of the flower, which just simply is. So what I'm suggesting here, although I'm using some complicated way of talking about it, what I'm suggesting is endeavor to be like that child. That's not an easy thing. And to come back to the simplicity of this image, it's that I'm actually a permeable being. That I don't have to hold this tight and keep the fence up. All the time, there's stuff coming and going. And so I can encounter that it's an image of a Buddha, but it can be the flower, it can be the earth, it can be a raindrop, it can be all kinds of wonderful things. And that's why, in like the Lotus Sutra, where it's just talking about all the trees are covered with jewels, and all these people think, oh, come on, stop. And I say, have you looked at a tree lately? They're covered with jewels. They are covered with jewels. So how to see in that way? That's the meditation that I've been teaching the past few weeks. That's what that's about, is activating that part of our being, which is loosening up on making things what they are and receiving from things the significance of what they are, as opposed to just concretizing them. And it's so simple, we talk about all the time, but you can never really get there because it's to be enacted.
Hey, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have a follow-up story.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a question in here, but I think I'll just tell you the story,
Yeah.
maybe the question will arise. The other day, I was sweeping right out here by the gate. It's kind of evening, and there was this couple walking. I love that we have this altar of the Buddha's foot, sort of public-facing kind of altar. It was very sweet, and they had this big dog, and then the dog walked over and just started peeing on the altar, and it was this big dog was smiling at me, and this couple, they were so embarrassed, and they were trying to stop it. You can't move a dog when it's starting to go.
Yeah.
And I tried to tell them I wanted to say, don't worry, it's just not your practice. It's not meaningful to you. I wanted to say something like that, but I stopped myself, and I had this feeling of it became meaningful to them, maybe because there's some intuitive knowing that it's meaningful to other people, right? And it's very strange, that without any sort of communication, and in one way it's maybe they're just being respectful, but in another really precious way, it's sort of is that not how we share meaning? So that we feel it, even in a very, very superficial way. But so I guess my question is, do you think that what is the difference between universalizing sort of everyone should feel this is sacred, versus allowing that sense to emerge for yourself and for others, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So one of what a great story. So usually when you were universalizing something, we're making everything into one object. So that it's exactly the same clamp down, but now it's a universal clamp down. And this is really a great danger of religion. And so it's really imperative that we see that the universal is not the clamp down of the objectification of universal, but the universal is the individual meeting again and again and again. That pillar in front of the gate with the Buddha's foot, that's the Bodhi tree. And the Bodhi tree is right there in you. It's in every single place. In the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha says, I abide on sacred Vulture Peak and every other dwelling place. I abide there on Eagle Peak, is in this translation. I abide on Eagle Peak and every other dwelling place. Any place there could be any dwelling of any type of being imaginable, that is also where the Buddha is. So this is very different than saying, okay, it's all the Buddha. All the individual things don't matter. It's just that they're all a Buddha. And we're saying, no, every individual thing is the Buddha, and everything is the Buddha. Both are true. Like one doesn't come over top of the other. And so we get to learn that in all different kinds of ways. You know, that dog will become a Buddha in a future life from that offering. Really, I'm 100% serious about that, actually. We have many stories in the sutras about this. Someone who has been irreverent to the Buddha's robe or to some kind of image or something. And then this great teachers, they say again and again, and I'm just mimicking them, so that doesn't make me a great teacher, this is their karmic connection. And so we shouldn't be too abrasive in those places. That doesn't mean sacred things aren't sacred to us. We should let people know that. You know, when the Taliban blew up the largest Buddha statues in the world, some of the most ancient, it was very interesting. I mean, I really wish they hadn't. Super wish they hadn't. But when they went and they interviewed Buddhists, they had an article in I think it was Tricycle, and they just interviewed all these people, different people from different sanghas around North America, and said, you know, what do you think about this? And to the person, everyone said, I wish they wouldn't do that. But you know, things are impermanent. Like that's kind of central to our to our thing. And this image is that's exactly what it is a symbol. It's not just a symbol. See, this is what we have to be very careful of. It's not just a symbol. It is a symbol of something that is alive in every dwelling place. And so we care for it deeply. And when its time to go comes, we can mourn that. Just like us. It's exactly the same for us. These statues of flesh and ligaments. Yeah. Where did I put that thing there?